Hey there, this is Dr. Joel Gould, and you're listening to my archive podcast called Get Your Smile On. This is a podcast that I recorded in 2015, and there's some really great information that I'm looking forward to updating with my new podcast called Revolution Radio. Stay tuned.
All right, everybody. Hello. This is Dr. Joel Gould, and you're listening to Get Your Smile On. And we are broadcasting from beautiful Manhattan Beach, California. And today I'm very excited about our guest. We have Dr. Stephanie Seneff. Dr. Seneff, am I saying that right? Is it Seneff or Seneff?
Seneff is perfect. That's exactly right. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, well, you've got so many credits to your name. I thought it'd be best just to let you introduce yourself. You've got a very unique and interesting work history, and if maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, yes. My degrees are all from MIT, and I have a bachelor's undergraduate in biology, and then a MSEE and PhD degrees in computer science and electrical engineering. And I spent most of my career developing conversational systems that would support interactive, natural, human-like conversation with computers, which is things like Siri and Echo, Amazon Echo today, if you're familiar with those products, are kind of the outgrowth of the work that I did many years ago. About 8 or 9 years ago, I became very concerned about the autism epidemic in this country because I saw that autism rates were going up exponentially, and exponential growth is extremely scary. So I was frustrated that most of the research was going into genetics, and exponential growth is not a genetic problem. I mean, there may be a genetic predisposition, but that's not the reason for the epidemic. So I was determined to figure out what were the environmental factors that were contributing to this epidemic, and I dove in and I looked deep, and I learned all about autism. And then I also, at the same time, was looking into cardiovascular disease, and eventually kind of discovered that both autism and cardiovascular disease are products of a underlying pathology that is an epidemic in this country today. In our country, we have a severe systemic deficiency in sulfate, and so sulfate has become my god. And I really, really appreciate the importance of sulfate in the body and the various ways it gets derailed. And most especially, it wasn't until after 5 years of searching that I finally found my answer, and I think it's glyphosate. Glyphosate is the active ingredient in the pervasive herbicide Roundup. And it's all over the food. It's in the air. It's in the water. It's everywhere. The government thinks it's safe, so they're not monitoring it. And we're all being slowly poisoned by this cumulative, insidious toxin that's causing this severe deficiency in sulfate, as well as many other metabolic problems that then cause all these diseases, not just autism, but a huge list of diseases that are going up dramatically, derailing our healthcare system, probably going to bankrupt our country if we just continue on this path.
Well, that's quite an introduction.
I covered everything in the first sentence.
pretty much. Well, okay. So I'd like to, let my listener know a few things. So I came across your work in my investigation of sort of the topics that I was covering. I was covering sleep apnea, and of course, sleep apnea led me down a very strange pathway to vitamin D deficiency. And I know that vitamin D deficiency is now very well known. And I discovered your work in my investigation on vitamin D in the forms that it comes in. And so, one of the things that I guess there's a couple of topics I want to sort of lead with, but, people are all worried about cholesterol. It's been vilified as dangerous, it's evil. And, the reality is that cholesterol is really one chemical bond away from vitamin D. And all of this stuff is completely interrelated. So I guess I want to start at the beginning. And what struck me about you when I saw you right away is your enthusiasm and honesty and your genuine caring. And I love that, you said one thing, you had a statement, basically that if you want to stay healthy, eat organic, eat sulfur and cholesterol-rich foods, and get plenty of sunshine. So I kind of want to discuss
my formula.
So there you go. So when you eat organic, so I do want to talk about the glyphosate because I think it's the scariest thing that I've ever heard. A lot of people have heard about Monsanto and this and that, but so just to make it clear to my listeners that Roundup has glyphosate. Glyphosate has been said to be not harmful to humans, but it apparently is harmful to a lot of other things, like our gut bacteria. My question is, so this Roundup has been on the increase. Have you seen anyone who has any power to get the attention of the people who could make a change and say, hey, this is a toxic chemical that's everywhere and no one is paying any attention? In fact, kids could be literally spraying it on themselves in the garden. It could be in the tool shed.
Yes, I know. I mean, It's very frustrating to me that the government doesn't seem to want to hear this. I think that Monsanto has done such a good job of convincing us that glyphosate is harmless to humans that the regulators are extremely reluctant to believe otherwise, despite the fact that I believe the evidence is staring them in the face. It is absolutely unbelievable when you start to say, okay, Roundup is causing all these things, and you start to look at one thing after another, not just us, of course, the bees, the monarch butterflies. I mean, it's very, very clear that Roundup is playing a really important role in all these catastrophes that are happening in nature right now, not just us. And it is true that it is especially bad for the bacteria, but it's also bad for our own cells. Monsanto has painted this beautiful picture that glyphosate specifically attacks a particular biological pathway called the shikimate pathway, which is in the gut bacteria and which they use to make really important metabolites that our cells can't make. So it's not true that if our bacteria are affected by glyphosate, it doesn't affect us. It's going to cause deficiencies in those nutrients, which are the aromatic amino acids. They're not only building blocks of proteins, but they're also precursors to things like melatonin, serotonin, thyroid hormone, various B vitamins. I mean, there's lots of vitamin K. There's lots of stuff that comes out of that shikimate pathway that our gut microbes are doing for us. So one thing we've really learned to appreciate recently, there's been a lot of literature on the gut microbiome. All of a sudden we're like, oh my God, this thing's not working. People are aware that their microbiome is in trouble. People are offering all these probiotics. We're fighting this, but we're not recognizing that it's the glyphosate that's doing that. But more than that, glyphosate also affects our own cells in different ways. Not shikimate pathway, of course, because we don't have it. But when you look at what glyphosate does metabolically, it is unbelievable. And this is an insight that I only had a little over a year ago. I'm working with Anthony Samsel, and he and I have published several papers together. And our most recent paper addresses this newly discovered toxic effect of glyphosate, which we fully believe is happening because it explains everything. We have all these diseases, Alzheimer's, autism, colitis, all these various gut problems, and even kidney failure, diabetes, obesity, all these things that are going up dramatically in our society. And we're like, is it sugar, is it fat? I mean, we can't figure out what's causing this. It's the glyphosate that's causing all of it. It's very, very clear to me. And the reason is because it gets into proteins by mistake in place of glycine. This is the critical thing that it does. And I think Monsanto knows, the Monsanto executives, I think they know it does this. They're being very cagey about it, But Anthony has their documents, and their documents really come very close to basically saying, yes, it's doing this. I mean, they're seeing these puzzling results when they look at proteins. They try to see if the glyphosate's there. They don't see it. They add chemicals that will break down the proteins. Now they see it. I mean, they recognize the glyphosate is hiding in the protein. And this is very, very serious because when it replaces glycine in certain molecules, it's going to destroy that protein's ability to do its job, and it's going to make that protein difficult to break down. And both of those are going to have devastating effects. And so you can trace, and in our paper we do, all the diseases that are going up dramatically, the obesity, the diabetes, the autism, the Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, all these things. For each one of them, you can find specific enzymes, specific proteins that critically depend on glycines. So you replace those glycines with glyphosate, the protein doesn't work, you break it, and then you cause that metabolic disorder. It's very, very clear to me that this is happening.
Wow. Okay. So, what about these factory farms where this is going on? Because, this is a real thing. They're spraying this stuff everywhere. Are the employees or the people who are on these farms running this, are they wearing like full hazmat suits, or are their families getting sick? How is this working on a realistic basis?
Yeah, I mean, I would hope they're wearing hazmat suits. I don't know, because we're told that glyphosate is so harmless, they're probably pretty careless with their use of it, and that probably gets them in trouble. And certainly there's a class action lawsuit coming out of California against Monsanto on the grounds of glyphosate causing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And there's some very clear, I mean, I was at the Monsanto Tribunal in Brussels, which was really interesting last October. And they really focused on glyphosate, and they had so many people coming from around the world and testifying about the dangers, about the consequences of glyphosate exposure to themselves. And there was a woman who came from Hawaii, and it was very clear because glyphosate was really the only chemical she was using on her farm. And then she had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and she was a member of this class action lawsuit. I mean, it's very clear that it causes non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and it makes sense because it goes into the bone marrow. This is what Monsanto found. Monsanto looked, and they exposed animals like rats to radio-labeled glyphosate so they could track the radio label. This is how they found out that there's something fishy going on, because they could see that there was radio label in protein. Like if they looked at the muscle, they could see that the radio label was there, which meant the glyphosate was there. But then when they tested for the glyphosate, it came out with much less than what you would account for with a radio label. So there was missing glyphosate in the protein. That's because when it gets stuck into the protein chain, you don't see it using the normal methods for testing for it. That's very, very dangerous because you could take a soy protein bar and you could test it for glyphosate, and you might find there's a lot less. You would be happy to see, there's very little, but actually it's hiding in the protein. And that's what makes it really, really dangerous, too, because it's when it's in the protein, that's when the protein becomes allergenic. And we have all these food allergies, to soy, to peanuts, to wheat.
Yeah.
And wheat, in fact, is very clear because glyphosate usage on wheat has gone up dramatically in step with the dramatic rise in celiac disease and gluten intolerance. We've got so many people now who can't eat wheat, and it's being poisoned by the glyphosate. The glyphosate is getting into the wheat protein, and the protein can't be broken down, and it's becoming allergenic. It's very clear.
Well, and I want to let my listeners know that this is something that you can go to your local hardware store or grocery store and buy, and you can literally just spray it on your own garden of food that you're going to eat. And there really isn't any kind of warning that says, hey, this could cause other issues. That's correct?
Right. That's absolutely right. I mean, we're led to believe that it's completely harmless to humans, and so people are very careless with it. It's not regulated. Most of those chemicals, most of the other herbicides, you've got to go through process before. You can't just go down to the store and buy it. But Roundup, that's just great stuff. You can just buy it, pour it all. You can just do whatever you want with it. No one's going to stop
I remember
you.
There was a time when they were advertising on commercials all the time. That you just would buy this for your weeds. But so then there is some hope. If someone has launched a class action suit, I had John Cannell on the show, and I asked him a question: when is this going to change? He was talking about autism, and he's a big proponent of vitamin D, and he said when a class action lawsuit happens and there's money to be paid, that's when things are going to change. So I guess the answer lies in the courts, and that if the lawsuits are there and if there's judgments, I guess that's when they're going to have to start to look at it. I guess it's when money starts to be the issue.
Right, and of course they're focusing on the cancer, which I think is a mistake, because glyphosate does cause cancer. I'm pretty convinced it's causing pancreatic cancer, thyroid cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer. I'm pretty convinced colon cancer. Those are looking, they correlate very well, and I can explain how it would. It goes into the glands. It really gets into the glands. It gets into the lymph system. It gets into the bone marrow. When it's in the bone marrow, it's going to get into the red blood cells, because all those stem cells in the bone marrow that become immune cells, the immune system, and the red blood cells are coming out of the bone marrow. They're carrying glyphosate on their backs. So when you get, if you get an injury or something, and then you're going to have the immune system come in and try to repair the injury, that's going to bring glyphosate into the injury site. That's going to cause inflammation. It's going to make the injury not heal properly. You're going to have down the road, you're going to have rheumatoid arthritis. I mean, we have an epidemic in various kinds of back pain, shoulder pain.
Wow.
There's huge amounts of glycine in collagen, and collagen is really it's the most common molecule by far, most common protein by far in the body is collagen, loaded with glycine. That means it's got an opportunity to get glyphosate substituting for the glycine. That's going to mess up the crystalline structure of the collagen, so it won't have the proper elastic and tensile strength properties. And you're going to get all kinds of your joints aren't going to work right. They're not going to be buffered properly. You're going to have scraping of the joints against each other. You're going to get, pain. So we've got all these painkillers. People are taking, our country consumes 80% of the opioid pain drugs in the world, 80%.
Yeah, I believe.
And we have by far the most glyphosate. Our countries, we're out there. We're the ones who are the guinea pigs. That hopefully we're going to show the rest of the world that this is a really bad idea. Our country may go down the tubes, but hopefully the rest of them will wake up and realize, my God, I don't want to be there myself. We're going to try to get rid of this stuff. But we're we're great with it.
We're the canaries in the coal mine. Okay, so I want to turn this discussion with glyphosate to what it does and how it's affecting our sun exposure and our vitamin D production, and how there's a link between what's going on. And the other thing is, I want to talk about that first. And it sort of brings me to the topic of sunscreen as well.
Right.
So
great topic.
So. Okay, so I know that I'm going to get in trouble, or have gotten in trouble for saying that sunscreen causes cancer, and the word saying causes anything is kind of difficult. But the reality is, I've explained to my patients many times over that when you wear sunscreen, it filters all your UVB radiation, so you can't make enough vitamin D, but you're still letting in the UVA radiation. But what else is there in sunscreen that's dangerous people should know about?
Well, it's very interesting because sunscreen has two things in it that I worry about, at least two things, aluminum and retinoic acid. And both of those are going to mess up sulfate synthesis. So what happens, what I believe, is that in exposure to sunlight is catalyst to allow the cells, many different cells in the body, the red blood cells, the endothelial cells lining the artery walls, the keratinocytes in the skin, all of them get into business of making sulfate in response to sunlight. It's really, really interesting. They pick up those frequencies in the sunlight, and they need the infrared, the blue light, and also the UV. All of those are needed to make the sulfate. And it's a beautiful system, just like a plant, uses chlorophyll to capture sunlight and make biomass. We capture sunlight to make energy that actually fuels our muscles and our brain, our neurons, So this is what distinguishes animals from plants. We have movement, we have a nervous system. Plants don't have these things. And I think that's how we use the sunlight, is to supply that electrical energy to those systems. Electricity, sunlight is converted into electricity, just like a solar panel in our skin through sulfate.
So I want to slow down, because I want people to understand that, listening, that because we've talked about sunlight exposure for vitamin D, that's obvious. But so what you're saying is that humans and animals in general, we actually take energy from the sun, and we utilize that, and how we convert that energy. And I sort of want to explain, to refresh people's memories, that when the UVB radiation of the sun hits your skin, the actual vibration of it hitting your skin breaks the chemical bond on cholesterol, turning into vitamin D. But obviously, all this radiation, there's UVA, UVB, and then visible light. So it's doing all these other things. So you need all three of those to actually take sulfur that you have in your diet, or
infrared as well.
Infrared. Wow. And so that's the catalyst that puts sulfur into sulfate and attaches it to cholesterol.
Yes, and to vitamin D. And to vitamin D.
Right.
It's really fascinating. And so in fact, the infrared, actually, so there's this thing called the exclusion zone. And I don't know if you've looked at Gerald Pollack's work. He's a really super guy. He's a professor in Seattle at University of Washington. Really interesting guy. I know him personally. And he's written books for the public that are wonderful if you have a chance. Cells, Gels, and the Engines of Life is one of his books. And the fourth phase of water is a later book, and I've read both of them. And the fourth phase of water in particular is so interesting, because water, of course, is essential for life. Water is by far the most common molecule in our body, and the water in our body is mostly in this gelled state, which is this fourth phase. So water is, of course, liquid. This liquid, gas, and solid. That's always the three states of matter. But then there's gel. And gel is the fourth phase of water. Think of Jell-O. You take a little package of gelatin, you put it into some boiling water, you let it sit in the refrigerator, it gets hard, right? It's mostly water, but it's water in a different state. It's a liquid crystal water. And that gel is so, so important for biological function in all the animals. Plants, animals, everybody, the microbes, everybody needs that gelled water. But, you can't gel the water in the blood, or else the blood won't circulate. So the body has a really interesting challenge to maintain fluid water in all the blood vessels, but yet to have gelled water everywhere else. It's a very, very interesting challenge, and the body has come up with really sophisticated ways to do that, which get derailed by glyphosate and by aluminum, by the way. So there's aluminum in the sunscreen, especially the high-end ones. And enos is the molecule. Endothelial nitric oxide synthase is the molecule that makes the sulfate. It also makes nitrate. So it oxidizes both sulfur and nitrogen. It's called a moonlighting enzyme. Really, really fascinating enzyme. Very sophisticated enzyme, this endothelial nitric oxide synthase. That's the guy who responds to the sunlight. It has these flavins in it that respond to blue light, convert it to green light, and release electrons. And those electrons oxidize oxygen to make superoxide. And the superoxide then reacts with the sulfur to make sulfate. It's really, really beautiful.
Wow. Okay.
And you need that. So you need that blue light.
Okay. So I want to sort of go back and clarify. So that was a lot of information. So basically, the way that when I saw your work, and people they've heard about things are either water soluble or fat soluble.
Yes,
and so what
very
I was fascinated by was that when you put that sulfate group onto your cholesterol or vitamin D, now it becomes water soluble, whereas before it was only fat soluble, so it get transported. So that's very important.
It's extremely important.
So what you're saying is that the enzyme that helps to do all the work when you're out in the sun hits you, and this enzyme helps to take sulfur in your diet and put it on to the chemicals, especially cholesterol, which is a priority.
Yes.
That this is being interfered with not only by Roundup and glyphosate, but also by aluminum, and then even by
also by retinoic acid.
Great. And then
the vitamin A. That's right. The vitamin A in the sunscreen suppresses. Yeah.
So these things are specifically in sunscreen. Okay. So then the other thing this leads us to this other discussion of now we're talking about this cholesterol. And again, I want everybody to remember that all of your skin, your cell membranes are made up primarily of cholesterol. It's what holds us together. Cholesterol is a good thing. And we've talked about this before on my show, that eating egg yolks is actually good for you, and that, low-fat diet is not good for you. But the important part I want to sort of talk about is the heart disease and strokes. So
yes.
Fascinating that one of the things you talk about is how red blood cells get coated with this cholesterol sulfate, and it maintains that
yes.
negative charge so that it can
Absolutely.
flow. These red blood cells can flow freely through the blood vessels. So tell us about
yes.
strokes. What's the cause of strokes and heart attacks then? Because I know our doctors want us to think it's eating butter and red meat, and we know that it's not. But tell us, what is the cause?
Right. Well, it's very interesting because people think of cholesterol as a demon, and actually I believe heart disease is a cholesterol deficiency problem. It's really quite remarkable that it's the opposite of what they're saying. It's more specifically a cholesterol sulfate deficiency problem. The skin makes tons of cholesterol sulfate. It's making it all the time, and it really is important for the barrier function as well, to keep the microbes out so that you don't get sepsis, But the cholesterol sulfate is made in the skin. Yeah?
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify that one of the other functions of this cholesterol sulfate is that it helps, as your skin matures, it helps to form a nice thick layer that protects you from microbes getting in, keeps moisture in, and also diffuses sunlight. So it's kind of your natural sunscreen.
Exactly so, yes. And in fact, that's the thing with the sunscreen. You're messing up the body's natural ability to protect itself from the sun, which is really a very bad idea. Because the natural ability is actually so much more effective. In fact, skin melanoma, you probably know this, melanoma has been going up dramatically in step with a dramatic rise in the use of sunscreen. Those two curves line up. It's really quite remarkable. I think we're causing melanoma with the sunscreen. It's so crazy.
Absolutely.
We're so backwards.
That's good. Okay, so go back to the I love the
cholesterol sulfate.
Okay.
Yeah. And we'll get to the heart attack, because that's extremely interesting. People think, the LDL's high. I've got high LDL. I need to take a statin drug. I need to clobber the liver so I can't make cholesterol so that I can shrink those, plaque buildup in the artery wall. It sounds very simple. Yeah, there's this LDL that goes and it gets stuck, just passively accumulates in the arteries leading into the heart. Eventually it blocks them. You get a heart attack. Terrible. We don't want that, so we'll take the Lipitor. But the fact is, I believe it's going actively into the arteries, especially the arteries leading into the heart. The cholesterol is being actively accumulated there, not passively. It's an active process to make that cholesterol available immediately, to become cholesterol sulfate as soon as sulfate's available. So the bottleneck is the sulfate. There's not enough sulfate. The cholesterol can't get out into the blood because of that. Cholesterol can't even get from the cell into the HDL particle. Usually, HDL particles will pull that cholesterol out of that plaque. But they can't pull it out if there's no sulfate. You need the sulfate to be able to bridge the aqueous medium that separates the HDL particle from the cell membrane. The cholesterol will hop over to the HDL particle if it's sulfated.
Right. So you're saying that basically, and does the cholesterol go in to repair the heart muscle? Is that what it's trying to do?
Yeah, the heart muscle is actually suffering from a cholesterol deficiency and a sulfate deficiency problem, both. And so if you take your statin drug, fine, you might avoid a heart attack, but you'll end up with heart failure, which is a much worse disease. Statin drugs are causing, I think, the epidemic in heart failure because of the lack of cholesterol and sulfate in the heart.
So basically, we have a problem where people think that they're eating fat, the fat's going and clogging their coronary arteries, and they think that this is the cause of heart disease. And what you're saying is this is an intentional action by our bodies to put a bunch of cholesterol in close proximity to our heart so that it can repair the daily needs of our heart. But in people who either aren't eating enough sulfur or aren't going outside. So is it a sulfur deficiency, or is it a sunlight deficiency, or is it both? And what would sort of percentage-wise would it be?
It's both. It's definitely both. And there's sulfur deficiency in the food because glyphosate actually disrupts the uptake of sulfur into the plants. So the plants are deficient in sulfur. And, of course, the animals are too because they're eating the same plants. They're eating plants that are loaded with glyphosate. And glyphosate is a train wreck, an absolute train wreck for sulfate in every dimension. It interferes with sulfate synthesis. It interferes with sulfate transport. It causes sulfate loss through the kidneys. And it does that by virtue of messing up vitamin D because glyphosate suppresses these enzymes in the liver called the cytochrome P450 enzymes. And those enzymes are needed to activate vitamin D, both in the liver and in the kidney. Vitamin D goes through quite a dance before it becomes activated. It has to go to the kidney, get changed into the, it gets hydrolyzed in the liver, and then it goes to the kidney, gets hydrolyzed again. So 1,25, OH, vitamin D, that's the active form. you have to have those cytochrome P450 enzymes working to be able to do that. That's why we have an epidemic in vitamin D deficiency, is because of the glyphosate poisoning. It's causing the deficiency.
Wow.
And the deficiency causes a loss of sulfate through the kidneys. Without the vitamin D, the kidneys start throwing away sulfate.
Wow. Okay.
So it's really amazing.
So then what you're saying is that even though someone may have, and is this affecting the 25-OH form, or is it affecting the transfer of the 25-OH to the active form?
It can't produce the 1,25-OH vitamin D. It can't even produce the first step of it. The liver needs the CYP enzyme to do the first step, and then the second step takes place in the kidney. That needs CYP enzymes too, and those CYP enzymes are wrecked by glyphosate.
So basically,
that's why we have it. And of course, we have a deficiency also because people are avoiding the sun, they're putting sunscreen. All those things are helping to contribute as well to the vitamin D. But
when they are actually going in the sun and getting their vitamin D, the vitamin D is becoming less effective because of this glyphosate.
Yeah, it still has to go to the liver and get activated. So you could be making all the vitamin D in the world with the sun, but if you can't activate it in the liver, it's not going to be useful to you.
Okay, so now a little different question. How long does it stay in your body? How can you get rid of it? And once it's in you, is it in you forever? Does it wear off? How does that all work?
Serious problem, because glyphosate is cumulatively toxic. That's what's so insidious. Every day you eat food with glyphosate in it, a certain portion of it is going to end up in your bone marrow or someplace in your tissues. The glyphosate goes, as I said, into the lymph system. It goes into the glands, and it accumulates, and especially accumulates in the bone marrow. Monsanto found the highest levels in the bone marrow of all the tissues they examined, which is really terrifying because that's where the precursor stem cells come from that repair
every cell
things.
in your body. Wow, that sounds
well.
Okay.
Certainly all the blood cells and the immune cells. And the immune system gets shot to hell by glyphosate. Immune deficiency is what you're going to end up with. Then you get non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, or you get leukemia. These are caused by the glyphosate poisoning of the white blood cells, and the red blood cells are completely destroyed by glyphosate as well.
Oh my gosh, this is depressing stuff. So, okay, I'd like to change the subject a bit. So, basically, you are seeing a little bit of action going on, at least in California. They're trying to speak up and say, hey, this is maybe not this is not a pesticide that we want to have in our state. So, I know that California is usually the leading edge of that type of activity, but let's hope that something can get done on this. So,
California has been great, actually. Individual cities in California have banned glyphosate in public places and things like that. I think that's a great movement, and they set a good example. Other states, other cities should follow suit. Anybody who wants to become an activist, to start working on your own town and get them to ban glyphosate in the schools, ban glyphosate in the public spaces. That's a way to start,
Okay, I love it. Okay, fantastic. Well, we're getting towards the end of the show here, and I kind of want to end on a more positive note. So what I want to go back to is the idea that the human body gets a charge of energy from the sun. And I want to talk about something that people have asked me about, and I sort of looked into. At first, I thought it was just kind of silly stuff. It's something called earthing, when you walk outside with bare feet on the grass. So tell us, is this a real thing? Is this some hocus pocus stuff, or what's the story with earthing? And how does it relate to
absolutely.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's real. The Earth is a giant negatively charged, object. It's got negative charge, and I especially advocate walking barefoot in the water at the edge of the ocean. That is like one of the most, especially on a sunny day, that's one of the most healthy things you can do, because you get really good grounding. If you're in the water, the salt water, is just really good conductor, and you get that negative charge coming right out of the sand on the earth and going into your body. And negative charge is so important for the blood. That's what really keeps the blood flowing. And so really just negative charge deficiency is a driver to disease.
I have a vision of myself walking along the water, but I feel like I should either have a mug of beer in my hand or some seafood, because I just want to real quickly talk about where would people find sulfur in their natural environment.
Yes,
where
those
are
good choices. Yes, it's interesting that beer is a fermented food too, so I actually think it's a pretty hearty food. It's got a lot of B vitamins. Beer is really not a bad organic beer, of course, which is hard to find.
Oh my gosh, there's no glyphosate in beer. We're not going to find glyphosate in beer. I guess if they use Roundup for the crops,
it is barley. They spray barley with Roundup right before the harvest. Beer is one. I'm sure that it's got glyphosate in it. It really bothers me actually that's the case. Wine was tested in California. Moms Across America. Zen Honeycutt, she's really awesome. She's an advocate. She's a mom, and she's a real active anti-glyphosate person. And she tested 12 different wines, California wines, all 12 of them came out positive for glyphosate, including biodynamic wines. They had less, but they still had it. So everything's contaminated. The beer, the wine, and the barley is a huge one. And wheat, wheat products are showing up with extremely high levels of glyphosate, like Oreo cookies and those goldfish crackers and Cheerios and all these things that kids are so fond of. They're loaded with glyphosate. So kids are being poisoned. It's no wonder we have the autism epidemic. I want to end on a high note. I don't know how to do it. I mean, I think we have to do something absolutely drastic. I think we should, if I had my wish, I would tell President Trump, ban glyphosate. Don't allow us to make it. Don't allow us to sell it. Don't allow us to use it. Just ban it. That would be the thing. That would be the thing we need more than anything else. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
No, well,
so
I guess that
probably predict this country's just going to go down. We've got all this health care issues. Obamacare is too expensive. Nobody can afford it. Of course people can't afford it. Everybody's
sick. And here's why.
Yeah, everybody's sick. So until we face the fact that we're sick, we're not going to succeed. This country is just going to, fail. I mean, that's not a happy note, but individually you can make a difference. I mean, the good news is you've got organic. You can buy it, certified organic. We buy everything certified organic in my household, including the spices. As I said, the wine, the beer, everything is certified organic. Do that. And tell your friends to do that. Push that market, because we are getting a growth in organic, and we're having to import the organics, of course, because our country can't produce it. But the farmers are going to get wise up. If I'm a farmer and I'm putting this poison on, I'm exposing myself, why wouldn't I think, geez, I should really convert to organic? The farmers, if you're a farmer, do it. Convert to organic. You will not regret it, because it's going to be in such high demand once everybody realizes how awful the poisoning situation is.
Wow.
So that would be my high note. Luckily, we have certified organic, and that's important.
Okay, well, hopefully what I'm trying to do, I've got my new book, and it's called The Modern Epidemic, and basically it's what the separation of the human animal from the conditions that we evolved in, and I can't think of anything that exemplifies this more than glyphosate was not around when we were hunter-gatherers, and we really need to get back to the stages where we are putting into our bodies what these bodies evolved on, and we really have to make some big changes. So I really want to thank you for your time and for your enthusiasm for the subject, and I really hope that this interview, which will be posted on my book's website, so when I do discuss these things, and my chapter on, I had a chapter on vitamin D, and I decided to change it to sunscreen causes cancer, because I wanted it to be just the right amount of controversial for people to really understand. And you're exactly right. The way this changes is when every single person makes a financial choice and says, I'm not going to buy this stuff, but God, I love Oreos. Okay, so on that note, I'm going to say thank you so much. Really appreciated your time with us, and look forward to hopefully seeing some incredible and great changes to our food chain and to our health. And thank you so much, Dr. Seneff. It was great speaking with you.
It was. Thank you.
Okay. Bye. Wow, that was some incredible information. I'm incredibly blown away now. I have been following Dr. Seneff's work for a while. I've read all of her PowerPoints, and she's got a great website which will be available for you to check out on my website when we post this podcast. But that was some incredible stuff. There were so many pieces of information. We didn't even get to the idea. Stephanie Seneff is very anti-statins as well. If anyone out there listening is taking cholesterol statins, you may want to reconsider, and you may want to go to her homepage and read some of the articles she's written about statins. Now, you have to understand that statins are a medication that medical doctors think is good for you, and this is part of what they want to do for you. Doctors are good people, and they mean well, but what they're actually doing is prescribing a medication that prevents your body from making cholesterol. And we didn't get into the idea that your brain is probably about 60% cholesterol. Most of the critical organs of your body are exclusively made of cholesterol, and now we're giving people a medication that interrupts the pathway for cholesterol to be made. Many, many people are getting sick from this, and I actually have several patients in my practice. When I question them when they're on statins, I've had several who said I had to get off of those because they hurt my body. I felt sick and terrible. And anybody listening to this podcast, I really encourage you to investigate further. To me, it doesn't make any sense why we'd want to inhibit a very natural and critical, substance in our body. And it's very important for people to understand that cholesterol is actually important and good for us. So, Maria, are you out there?
Yes, I am, and everything you're saying is hitting certain things. Like that makes total sense on why Alzheimer is ridiculous right now. Because I remember my grandmother back in the day talking about, taking her cholesterol medication. It was commonly prescribed, and now look at all of the Alzheimer patients. And then when you were talking to the doctor and the lymphoma came up, my father has lymphoma, and this is just craziness. But the biggest thing, and I didn't realize this until I was helping one of my clients clean out her mother's home, and I saw an original map of Disneyland. And did you know that Monsanto was the original sponsors of a lot of the rides at Disneyland?
Really? Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Way back in the 50s. Yes. So think about how long, because what the doctor said is everyone just thinks it's okay to just go ahead and spray it on their stuff because we've been programmed. I saw that and went, Monsanto? Oh my gosh. And it was right there. This ride is sponsored by Monsanto. Monsanto. Oh my gosh. Well, so what's interesting is, people are all against GMOs. And the thing is that I think most people think that they don't want to eat something where the genes have been altered because we don't know what it does in our bodies, what our actual chemical breakdown is, which is something that I was thinking about, that I would want to avoid GMO foods. But now here this comes along, and the real danger of GMO foods is that what they've done is they've genetically modified crops to be affected by this Roundup stuff, so that it's actually the glyphosate that's the dangerous part of GMO foods. It's not actually the genetic modification that's causing it. It's the use of these pesticides. And we didn't get a chance to talk about the idea is that when they harvest these crops, they spray them. They totally coat them with this glyphosate to dry them out. So they're really putting an extra dose of toxins into everything that we get. And then the sad part is that all this stuff literally is the basis for what we use for our manufactured food. There she's saying, this is going to Oreo cookies and these fish crackers. This is just really tragic to hear. And, anytime you see kids out, they're always eating these little fish crackers, and just how terrifying.
Right.
Incredible.
The other thing too is when I went to Greece, and I spend a lot of time in Greece, I used to sell a lot of the stuff we have in Greece or here in America. And one of the things that my Canadian friend always says, please bring me some peanut butter because they don't make it in Greece. But do you know, I always lose a lot of weight because I'm eating food that doesn't have all this crap in it.
That's for sure. So we haven't actually. So this leads me to another topic that is related to all this, because it's even worse. And I know the South sounds so horrible that we're actually doing this to ourselves, but it's not. No, there's one more topic that we haven't had a podcast on, and that's something called deuterium. And so we're going to leave that for another discussion. I'm going to bring on hopefully one of the international experts on this. But what happens is when we take these foods that we make and we process them, we spray in different things, we hydrogenate them, and we put in preservatives. These preservatives are filled with this deuterium, which is as tragic to our health as this glyphosate is. So we'll talk about that another time. But I guess the correct answer is what you do on a daily basis. Every decision that you make affects your health. And so unbelievably, we need to be paying attention to what we're putting into our bodies. And, it's terrifying, to hear her say that it's in wine, it's in beer, it's in everywhere. So, gosh, sometimes, you just want to stick your head in the sand and forget about it. But pretty crazy stuff. So I want to actually, I want to turn it back around. And again, I want to end this whole discussion on more of a positive note. And some of the positive things that we heard from Dr. Seneff are that it's really important to eat organic. It's really important to eat more foods containing sulfur. And those are, things like broccoli, seafood, and beer. But you can Google that, what's high in sulfur. But then the other thing is that so many people are terrified of the sun. And it's really important to get some natural sun exposure. If you go outside between the hours of 10 a.m. and 3 p.m., the exact time that the dermatologists say don't go outside, that's the time when you're going to make your vitamin D, but that's also a time when you're going to be just sort of coated with real sunlight, and it's going to enter into your body to help to catalyze a lot of these reactions that put sulfur onto cholesterol. And, I wanted to sort of clarify as well. She was talking about gelled water, and this is real. So your body's got all this water, but it exists in a gelled state. And the reason it's gelled is because it's got a lot of negative charge from this sulfate. So get some fresh air, get some sunshine, don't burn, 10, 15 minutes out in that sun, that's it. And let your bare feet touch the ground on occasion. Wearing plastic shoes and living on concrete or living on on wooden floors raised above the ground. These are things that no one would even think of. And I want to bring this information forward as well a little bit in another episode. Is I went so far as to get something called earthing sheets, and I don't know that I sleep any better with them, but it's basically a sheet with a silver mesh that you plug into the ground on your wall. So there's that little single hole for the ground. So it's one of those unique ways that we can have that connection to nature, and I think it's really important. So on that note, I'm going to close it down and say thank you, everybody, for listening. If you've heard this podcast and anything in it really strikes you as important, please share this with your friends and your neighbors. The only way that these problems are going to change is that when each and every one of us goes to the grocery store and stops buying these products that have these toxins in it. That's the only time when manufacturers are going to make the change, because money always talks. All right, everybody, thank you very much for listening. And this is Dr. Joel Gould, broadcasting from Manhattan Beach, California. And this has been a major episode of Get Your Smile On. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Get Your Smile On with Dr. Joel Gould.
Holy shit, was
Keep
that a good
smiling
podcast?
and tune in next time to listen to Dr. Joel Gould reveal the secrets of cosmetic dentistry and wellness.